The Atheist Debates Patreon project presents Skepticism and Astrology. Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. I was asked the other day why I don't spend more time talking about other pseudoscience things. Why do I spend my time focused on religion? After all, shouldn't you be calling out astrology and homeopathy and all of these things? And the answer is yes. But there's a reason why I focus on what I focus on. And I figured I'd take a couple minutes to actually talk about this because I gave a lecture probably 15 years ago or more on my problems with the atheist community in general are that it is not skeptical enough to suit me. And that's a point of embarrassment. There are atheists who are atheists for bad reasons, who don't understand things. They overreach in their claims. It's a problem. And then I also talked about how the skeptic community wasn't atheistic enough to suit me, and that was a matter of personal preference because skepticism applies universally. Every claim, skepticism can evaluate and should evaluate any of them to see if the burden of proof has been met to find something believable or if something has in fact been falsified. Skepticism isn't about debunking because not every claim is debunkable or falsifiable. But of course, if we've debunked something pretty well, we should be educating people about that, not just the processes that lead to those conclusions, but what conclusions are most reasonable given skepticism as a foundational sort of epistemological framework. And so I have friends who will do the, hey, what's your sign thing? And family members. And it's like, oh, let me check my horoscope today. And I just let it go. Mostly. Mostly. Mainly because for most people, it's a bit of fun. The impact of astrology is minimal compared to a number of other things that are going on in the world and causing problems. Astrology can be debunked with one word: twins. Two people born the exact same time, the same delivery, don't live the same life despite being impacted exactly the same by the proposed star sign stuff. Similarly, you don't have to just go to twins. Two people could give birth side by side within the same 10-second period at a given hospital, and those kids don't have the same life. Matter of fact, the impact of their parents and the financial situation and what country they're in and whether they have access to education and health and all of these things dramatically impact their life more than the date and time that they were born. Yes, in a fairly deterministic universe, of course it has an impact that you were born in this time in this place, but that's not something that you go to the star signs for, or which star sign is rising in which house or any of that. We've tested this many times. Astrology has been promoted and encouraged, and so we've done tests. Jimmy and I did a test with Seth. Jimmy paid for readings so we could figure out which ones applied to us. Randy had done a number of different tests on this, so have other organizations. You can take a horoscope reading that was written for a specific person and give it to 100 other people, and many of them will just say, oh yes, that was for me. We read into it. We see what we want to see. We've tested this over and over again. You could take old newspaper horoscopes, the general, fortune cookie bits of wisdom tossed out. Ooh, Aries, today you're going to have a difficult day. You should rein it in a bit. And assign them to people with different star signs 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the line. And there's no reason to think that they would be any less accurate or perceived as any less accurate. The accuracy doesn't change based on who the reading was for or what the star sign was or anything else. You can shuffle things up. We've done this test. The reality is that we seem to need and want guidance and entertainment, and we like to have our thoughts challenged in ways where, ooh, let me think about this from a different direction. And so astrology and sometimes tarot cards and other things, even secular people will engage in it as a sort of bit of fun, or maybe it's a way to kind of think, but some people will take it too far. And astrology is dumb, like genuinely dumb. There is no phenomenon there that has ever been demonstrated. Every attempt to demonstrate a phenomenon has failed. And there's not even a proposed mechanism for the phenomenon that does not appear to exist. Astrology is sort of a wishful thinking, a fantasy playtime. And so the question is like, all right, we get that. Astrology is just dumb, but why don't you post about homeopathy or other things that can impact public health? This moves beyond the wishful thinking of astrology and gets closer to things that are really potentially impacting people's lives, especially if they opt for it instead of medicine. I highly recommend everybody go out. You're on YouTube. You can do it now, but you might as well wait till this video is over and then look it up. Look up Tim Minchin's Storm. It is a great take on dealing with conversations about pseudoscience at a party type thing. None of these astrology, homeopathy, etc., are in the same category as religions. I divided things up into like 4 tiers. Tier 1 is the potential bit of fun. Astrology, your rabbit's rabbit's feet, lucky socks, things like that. The sort of light superstitions that people take a little bit seriously sometimes, but probably not that serious in general. Then there's tier 2. And this is things like homeopathy, Reiki, alternative healing, this next tier of the sort of pseudoscience where it's being used in conjunction with good science, like, oh, what can it possibly hurt? Then the problem is that all of these things can graduate, because the third tier is when something from tier 2, like homeopathy, is enforced and encouraged over actual reliable medical science. Also in tier 3, I think, would be things like conspiracy theories that inform other heuristics. Basically, the heuristic model, the path that your brain takes to reach a conclusion, is impacted by other things you believe and the processes, the heuristics that you use to reach those conclusions. And so if your conspiracy theory model is you can't trust what they want to tell you, or here's the secret that they don't want you to know about, all of that can be used to get people to engage and have problems beyond that. And then there's the tier 4 stuff, and that is foundational nonsense like religion. Religions then encourage people to tithe, to ritualistically give a portion of their wealth to the organization. Religions that deny basic human rights, that fuel wars, that impact individual and societal health in significant ways. Not only is that the area that I understand and know the most about, but it is, I think, the biggest elephant in the room. And it's one of the reasons why I don't spend as much time working with skeptical organizations, because I think they are often, and some of them have blatantly said this and I've called them out for it in the past, but I think they are often avoiding engaging on what is the most impactful pseudoscience, nonsense, bullshit in the world in order to go for the more low-hanging, easy fruit. And there can be value in that. If you've got somebody who's really entrenched in religion and you want to start teaching them how to think, you want to start by showing them how to think rationally about things like astrology and rabbit's foot and homeopathy and Reiki, and move up from there. You don't necessarily want to jump in right off the bat with, you have no way of demonstrating anything supernatural and your claims don't make any sense, and now your religion is doing this and causing this. The defensive walls get put up really quickly. But I will say, there's not a lot of wars being fought over astrology or over a particular parcel of land that has great resources for homeopathy, because there are no resources for homeopathy. It's water. But skepticism applies to everything, every single claim. But that does not mean that every single claim needs to be our focus. There's the idea of triage, of figuring out what is doing the most harm, and of the things that are doing harm, at what point can we inject ourselves to prevent further harm? If you're in an emergency room and 30 people come in with injuries, there are going to be some injuries that are too far gone for anybody to spend time prioritizing them. That person's just going to die almost certainly no matter what you do. There are other people whose injuries are severe and yet treatable and manageable. And then there are other people with minor injuries. That triage process is kind of the same thing that I use when I'm figuring out what calls to take on the show and how much time am I going to spend on this person who really has a new novel idea for God, the sort of bong rip theology that we talk about, when instead I'd rather be engaging with people who are trying to defend majority religious positions, because that's going to impact the most people, and it's the one place where I can inject usefully to some extent. In 20 years of doing these shows, I don't think anyone has ever called in to say marriage is between one man and one woman because the stars say so. Or that this group over here, this group of human beings, should be considered second-class citizens because it's written in the stars. That sort of thing does not happen outside of the tier 4 foundational nonsense like religions. Conspiracy theories and pseudoscience are rampant, and they're worth debunking and addressing. Things like flat earth, anti-vax, Reiki, aromatherapy, the sort of personality profile models that were just plucked out of thin air in our attempts to understand who we are. But the raw foundation, which is leading to much of this, is a disregard for reliable standards of accurate information in favor of the people you trust, or the people you know, or they lie to you, or don't trust the official story. Corruption definitely exists. Conspiracies exist. But that doesn't mean that every suspected corruption or conspiracy is in fact real. So while our round world is populated by people who ignore scientific findings, I'm going to prioritize focusing on the ones I know the most about and the ones that can do the most harm in the best way that I know how. And so that's why you haven't really seen videos very often about astrology or homeopathy or Bigfoot or UFOs or UAPs or whatever they're calling them now. I focus on religion because your religion is being used to manipulate you into supporting bad policies that go against your own self-interest as well as the interests of the people surround you, including policies that violate a plain text reading of your particular religion's holy book. People will do things on behalf of their religion once they've been convinced by a person that this is what somebody with their religious views should do, irrespective of whether or not that's actually consistent with the religious values that they supposedly have. Propaganda and spin and lies and trusting gut impressions are taking priority over good information, and it's killing us. Homeopathy doesn't do that. I remember Randy would go out on stage and swallow an entire bottle of homeopathic sleeping pills because they don't do anything. Homeopathy is a broken system, start to finish. It begins with the notion that like cures like, and that the more diluted this substance is, the stronger it becomes, and that water has a memory. And if you just take water that, used to have this in it, in the right doses, you'll be fine. And homeopathy doesn't have that big of an impact until it becomes the preferred treatment. And this is a case where it's not only that there's not sufficient evidence for it, but because people don't understand or trust the evidence against it, or are perhaps on occasion unaware of it. So making people aware of what's testable and what has been tested and what has consistently failed to demonstrate its efficacy is important. It's one of the key aspects of teaching skepticism: the how, the what, and the why. We as a culture have shifted the burden of proof away from where it should be, and instead opted for, hey, it's fun, what can it hurt? Only to find out a little bit down the road exactly how bad those outcomes can be. So when someone asks you what your sign is, lie. Go ahead. If you know what your sign is, just lie and say it's something else. And watch them. It's rare that you'll see someone say, that doesn't make sense. That's not what I would have. It would have been, oh, that's exactly what I thought. And it's this and this and this. And then once they show you that they didn't know anything about you or your sign, then you can correct that information. Or you can say, no, I'm just kidding. I was this. And they're like, oh, that actually makes more sense. And then you can say, no, I was kidding. I'm actually this. And that will hopefully teach them that this is confirmation bias. This is a little bit of gamesmanship. It is patently ridiculous to think that the location of stellar bodies has any sort of significant impact on your life. Not only is it something that's never demonstrated to be any sort of effect at all, but there's no attempt to demonstrate what could possibly be affecting your life. It can't be gravity. The impact of gravity drops off of the root mean squared law. It takes light from our sun like 8 minutes to even get here. And that's light moving at the speed of light. How could you possibly do calculations on somebody's birth and pretend like it comes down to, the minute? The nearest body to us is Earth, then the moon, then the sun, and things take time. And yet you want to pretend like light from 30 million light years away is relevant to what's going on in your life? There is no possible mechanism that we can come up with, and so it just falls in the category of magic. There's no demonstration that's true, plenty of demonstrations that it's not true. There's no mechanism because there's no phenomenon. Like most pseudoscience, the mechanism is a defect in here. The mechanism for astrology is our wishful thinking and our ability or inability to consistently think rationally. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.